Hello, welcome to Board Game Madness. I'm Mike Ganade, and in today's matchup we have the number 4 seed, Pandemic Legacy Season 0, versus the number 29 seed, Meeple Land. So to give you a quick background about each of these games, we'll start with Pandemic Legacy if you're unfamiliar with it. This is actually the third Pandemic Legacy game. There was Season 1 and Season 2 before it. And Season 0 is a prequel to sort of the events of Season 1. It takes place during the Cold War in the 1960s, and you play as a CIA agent, and instead of fighting disease cubes and containing those, you have sort of Soviet agents that amass in certain areas and cities and will catch you, and you're trying to thwart their plot to develop sort of a pathogen and virus to damage the world or to damage the democratic world. You know, I won't ruin any story things, but that's the overall motif of the game. The gameplay plays very similar to the original Pandemic, but it's sort of a new twist on the themes you're familiar with. Season 2 was a departure in the Legacy Series 2, but that sort of changed up the core game too much in my opinion, whereas Season 0 stays a little bit truer to what the original Pandemic game was all about. Meeple Land is a tile-laying game about building a theme park. So it's pretty straightforward. There are buses that come in, dropping off people to visit your theme park. You will draft those buses to your theme park, made up of different people that like different types of attractions. And then you will lay tiles and create paths in your theme park to make sure that each of those visitors has an attraction that they like to score the most points. So that's a quick overview of Meeple Land. In both cases, these games are, 2 to 4 players. You could play Pandemic 1 player, in my opinion. You could just sort of dual hand it. So 1 to 4 and up to 4 players. And they both play in about 60 minutes per play session. So as far as that stuff, we're very equal. But with that, we'll move on to the first category in our matchup, which is production value. So we'll start with Meeple Land as the lower seed, and because it sort of has easier components. And I should mention that when we get to Pandemic, while the game's been out for a while, and I don't think I'm holding up anything that may be a spoiler. I have opened some of the secret compartments, and there could potentially be some spoilers. Nothing major, I don't think, but don't yell at me afterwards. All right, so Meeple Land comes with, all these different meeples, hence the name. These represent people that like thrill rides, concessions, different things. And then you have different sized attractions. You've got your big attractions, your smaller attractions, and features. These are like additional entrances. You've got like burger shops. I know, here they are. I showed you the back. You've got like burger shops, and bathrooms, and other types of amenities that you would have in a theme park. And all you're doing is purchasing these buildings and placing them in your, in this grid, which every player has sort of their own tile grid, to get these types of people to the attraction and fill it up to make the most money. It's a really straightforward tile-laying game. It captures the theme well. I have no major complaints. It's one of those things, we've played it several times. The age says 10 plus. I played it with my, she's 9 now, but I was playing this game with her when she, 2 years ago when she was still like 6 or 7. Basically, if you don't even need to read to play this game, there's very little text. So even if you have a kid who can sit for the duration of the game, this is a pretty family-friendly game in my opinion. Now, Pandemic Season 0, on the other hand, has a lot more components. The box is filled with secret containers like this that you will open up, which have additional components in them. But it has, instead of the virus centers in the original one, you have sort of CIA safe houses, which are much cooler looking. And instead of fighting different viruses, you basically have to have these teams that are on these vans representing each symbol in each city to effectively take down the terrorist organization or the Cold War organization you're going up against. Instead of disease cubes, you've got these Soviet operatives, I guess, moving in and out of the city. There are some disease cubes in there as well. These are incident counters. So you've got some really nice pieces in this one. And most importantly, there are some really cool components in this game from production level. Your player, Your player identity is this passport where you get to use stickers to create different faces and identities based on which country you're from and upgrade them with different abilities as you play. So the fact that this is a passport that has some cool embossing on it really, really brings you into the game. And then if you played Pandemic before, you're probably familiar with, the cards that have a city name on them and stuff. But what's really cool about this one is the motif of the 1960s spy thriller. I actually like the way these cards, like the graphic design of these, a lot better. And instead of, epidemic cards, you have sort of Cold War escalation cards. And again, these are the cards that you draw to infect the cities and draw things, but just the general motif and graphic design of this particular season, I actually think is a lot cooler than the other ones. And then even the event cards, again, that graphic design just extends. And I think you have one of the games of Pandemic that has the best overall graphic design motif that we've had before. So I'm not going to dwell on this. For me, the production value in Pandemic Legacy Season 0 is like top notch. I love the art style. I love the graphic design. I love opening all the boxes. There's just so much stuff in the game. The passports themselves are just above and beyond awesome. And you can sort of just see with the foil embossing on it. Whereas Meeple Land, as an older game, has, I can point out this tile board is sort of flimsy. It's not really even full cardboard. And your cardboard tiles are bigger. It doesn't prevent you from enjoying and playing the game, but the production level is just a little lower than Pandemic. It's just a fact, in my opinion. So round 1, production has to go to Pandemic. We'll move on to round 2, which is game mechanics. Now, game mechanics, both of these games have solid game mechanics. They're both in my collection. I don't think there's anything from a design perspective that I would necessarily change with either game. I think both games function really well. For me, it really just comes down to personal preference. There's nothing strikingly wrong about either of these. They're both 2 to 4 players, so you can enjoy them in group. One's cooperative, one's competitive. So keep that in mind. If you're more of a competitive player, you may lean more towards Meeple Land. But I really like Meeple Land's gameplay. It's very straightforward. It's very family friendly. The rule book isn't even that long. Basically, it's just broken up into phases. The first phase is you draft buses of people to come into your place, and then you build out your place, build out your theme park to make sure you can meet the requirements of those people as best you can. If you have people left over, you will have people left over, and you're just going to have next round to build more things to try to accommodate everybody. And you just play through several rounds until the game's over. And whoever has the most successful theme park and makes the most money wins. Pandemic Legacy, I guess on the downside, if you don't like legacy games, when you finish and play through the 12 months of this game, the game is effectively over. Some people put a nice shadow box or crafty thing together, remembering their personal journey through the game. I don't have any of those personal attachments, and I tend to use the extra pieces in the box for spare parts for prototypes that I'm doing myself. Or I throw any extra stuff in the trash and make room on my shelf for new stuff. So the bad news is these legacy games can sort of be disposable, but the good news, in my opinion, is that these games create such a memorable experience. As a side note, Pandemic Legacy Season 1, playing through that game is one of my all-time highs, favorite board gaming experiences I've ever had. Season 2 was a bit of a letdown. Season 3, I haven't finished it yet, but it's arguably the best evolution of the legacy format so far. Season 1, the core game of Pandemic is so good, and it really relied heavily on that with a few legacy elements. Season 2 had better legacy elements, cooler map building stuff, but the core gameplay loop was a lot weaker of like providing supplies to a fallen world. This keeps the basic Pandemic, keeping things contained, like the original Pandemic and Season 1 did, while introducing some great new legacy concepts. I love the passports. I love the CIA theme a lot more. So gameplay-wise, Pandemic is one of my favorite sort of game series of all time. This has to be the winner. Season 0 is one of the best iterations of Pandemic, outside of sort of the base original game, where you're fighting disease cubes. So for me, again, Pandemic has to be game mechanics. And we'll move into theme here because this could be our first sort of clean sweep. But Pandemic Legacy, again, the artwork, the theme. I mean, just putting together your characters in this book and using the stickers to make your aliases is such a fun, cool, thematic thing. It almost single-handedly wins. And, I'm sure this game will move on and we can talk about it in more detail, but, everything about the theme in the 1960s CIA spy thriller, Cold War era stuff speaks to me even more than base Pandemic does. It's my favorite theme that Pandemic has, honestly. I know that there's some Pandemic Fall of Rome and Pandemic Cthulhu, outside of just the standard modern times fighting disease, but even those pale in comparison to this 1960s Cold War spy thriller, in my opinion. In fact, I can't even think of other games in my collection that have that theme, other than like Codenames sort of has that theme, just in its name, but doesn't particularly feel like that. But for me, theme, Pandemic Legacy, all the way. But even with that being said, I have to come over to Meeple Land and say that I've played a lot of different Dinosaur Islands and different park building games in the hopes of sort of achieving that cool theme park build of a game. And this is actually sort of a very surprising, despite its age, this actually does it a lot better than a lot of modern games. And I'm saying it's old, but I actually was looking at the back and it's only 2020. So it's not as old as I thought it was. But Meeple Land is a great little theme. It's sort of generic theme park, but it does everything well. I like the theme park theme in general. I've actually probably purchased and sold more games sort of in and around this theme of a theme park or Jurassic Park more than any other game, trying to find themes and mechanics that meld well together. And Meeple Land's one that stuck around and actually does it better than a lot of the other ones. So let's give it credit where credit's due. That's why it's in my collection. Meeple Land, it does have a good theme that I like as well. Okay, we're going to end here with the final category, which is replayability. And we'll go back to Pandemic Legacy and we'll talk about all the negatives about replayability and the fact that you will play this game 12 to 24 times approximately. That's sort of all the number of games that are in the box. It is a limited pool of those games. I think the strength of the Legacy games is that you'll actually play and finish it. Some games you buy, I'm sure you have games in your collection that you haven't even played 10 times, let alone 12 to 20 times. Pandemic Legacy, because of the experience changes and is so dynamic, I do think you end up playing the whole box, or at least a majority of the box. You play it several times once it's in your collection. So I guess replayability technically is worse in this game, but sort of your overall impressions and your lasting memory of the game is a lot stronger than a game like Meeple Land. But maybe for factual sake, we should give Meeple Land replayability, because the reality is you can play this game as many times as you want. I don't know if it has any expansions, but there's a solid game in this box that's very enjoyable. It does lack some variability from play to play. So, for me personally, I don't even think I've played this as many times as I've played Pandemic Legacy. I think I'm at eight-ish to 9-ish games in this, if I recall correctly, in my campaign. And this I probably played 4 or 5 times. Great family game, really approachable, but I think it lacks some depth and replayability for the more serious board gamer out there. But it's a great sort of gateway game, skewing younger game. This is a really solid game. So replayability for me personally, I'd probably get to Pandemic Legacy, but for fact's sake and just to keep things a little more interesting, we will give it to Meeple Land on the technicality that you can play this game technically as many times as you want until you get sick of it, whereas Pandemic Legacy, once you play through the campaign, you would basically have to buy it again to play through it again. I'm not sure how much replayability it has once you've finished and put all your stickers out and opened all the boxes. So with that, we have a clear winner in Pandemic Legacy Season 0. It's a great series of games. All the Pandemic Legacies I think have been worth playing. Season 1, certainly excellent. Season 0 has been excellent so far. Season 2, I would say, is the weakest. Meeple Land, a solid family game, but not strong enough to take out such a high seed here. And personally, one that I think we'll see go pretty far in this tournament. I really do love this game. With that ends our matchup for today. As always, please like and subscribe and comment to this video. It really means the world to us to help motivate us in this experiment we're doing. I don't know of anybody else that's done a sort of top 10 list or top 16 or however many games are in this bracket, this tournament list this way, but we're inherently all getting to my top 10 list, top 4 top game list in my collection in a very inadvertent way through the course of this experiment called Board Game Madness. So thank you all for watching and subscribing, and we will see you next time.